this is Felicia Moore again. Hello, I hope everyone is doing great. We have another great show with good information. On the bottom, you see Ask Felicia at exitwestmidtown.com. We're here on Donald Lee Hollowell Parkway, always ready to answer your questions. And when you need help, we're ready to serve you here as well. So if you have any questions throughout this, or if you need advanced information, because we're just going step by step, feel free to give me a call by reaching out to me on Ask Felicia at exitwestmidtown.com. That is the email. Or you can send a text to, Ask Felicia to 85377. And I'll respond to you. Also, if you have some groups that you would like for us to be able to share some real estate information, if you're a property owner, there are things that you should know and make sure that you're watching out for. If you're looking to rent, as we're doing now, we want to make sure that you are fully engaged with what you need to do, the must-know things that you need to know in order to have a smooth transition. Because believe me, there's scammers out there. There's so many things that you may not think about because you're rushing and bustling, trying to find a place and all that. And there are steps you may miss along the way, only to find out you wish you hadn't. So why not learn in advance so that you don't have to experience the negative of not being prepared? Today, we are going to talk about one of the biggest pieces, other than step 1, 2, and 3. We're on step 4 on the lease agreement. But before we get into that, I want to recap where we were. We talked about the budget, how that's the most important thing. You got to make sure you can afford to move where you want to move. Number 2, you got to think about location, from if you have kids, school, work, those things. Number 3, we talked about briefly, which we'll go into more detail in a future show, about avoiding, unfortunately, there are a lot of scams out here where they're taking people's hard-earned money, because you got to go back to the budget. You got to have that first month's rent, that last month's rent, that security deposit, all of the things that you need, the money to move in and all that, only to find out when you get there with the truck and you're ready to move in that the person you sent all your hard-earned money to does not have the right to lease you that property, and you have been scammed. And now you have nowhere to go. You spend all of this money, and you need all that money plus to be able to find somewhere else. So we talked about that. And then we also talked about, once you're sure you're good, you're now at the property, the one that you want to purchase, and what you should do in inspecting it for the property condition. Today, we're going to talk about, before you put your name on that dotted line, what is in the lease agreement and what you need to look out for. So that's what we're going to hit today. I certainly hope it will be great information. Again, you can reach out to me as you can. We're going to take a brief break, and then we're going to come right back and get right into it, because there's a lot of information that we need to share. Right now, we're going to take a break, and we will be right back. And we're back. I certainly hope you have liked this video, shared this video with someone that you may know that can use this information. But most importantly, please subscribe to the channel. The likes and the subscribes are really going to help us, because we want to make sure YouTube knows that people like this information and content that we're giving, so that they will share it out to other people and we can build our audience. So please go out, subscribe, and make sure you hit that. That's the thumbs up button for the like. The subscribe, you will see a subscribe button, and then hit that bell in the drop down for all notifications, so you're notified when the shows are on. So today we're talking about the biggest document that you're going to sign, and that is the lease agreement. Everything that I've researched about this and that I know about this is that you have to read it thoroughly. Now, I know, and you know, I'm guilty of it too. You see those terms of conditions, or somebody put something in front of you. They kind of just can't say, oh, well, says this and this says that. And you just kind of blindly sign it because you don't want to read all of the information. This is one time I tell you, you do not want to sign anybody's lease agreement or any other document for that matter. But particularly today, we're talking about that lease agreement without you reading and understanding every bit of it. I would suggest that when you know that you're going to get that property in advance of signing it, that you ask the landlord for a copy of the lease agreement so that when you go to sign it or you go to that management company, wherever you're going to sign it, you will have them explain it to you. You will review it again, but you have already read it because you may have questions. It may not be worded in the way that you think you understand what it says and what it doesn't. So read everything I have, read it thoroughly, evaluate the lease, ask questions, um, look at the most important pieces. So let's go over it. Let's go over some of those things that'll be in a lease agreement. Again, you're going to read it thoroughly, which means you're going to read everything. If it takes you 2 or 3 days to do it, you might not have an apartment, but you need to sit down and read it. Because I'm going to tell you what, when you come into a problem or issue, and then put it away so you know where it is, you can go back to that lease agreement and it may be your saving grace. You need to understand the terms of conditions. So just reading it is one thing, but do you understand what you read? Is it worded in a way that isn't so clear? That's why you've got to ask these questions. Some of the main things you're going to be looking at is how long you have to be in a lease, how can you renew this lease, how are rent increases dealt with, and the rules regarding your pets. Are there extra deposits for pets? Are there certain weight limits for pets? Can you not have cats and have dogs, or not have dogs and have cats or birds or guinea pigs or anything? Aquariums even, because they can cause damage if they get broken. You need to make sure that you are on the same wavelength, like this, with the landlord in terms of pets. Any alterations you may make to the property. You may have just all white walls in the whole apartment, but you want blue in your bedroom and another color in your kitchen. Can you paint it? You have got to deal with the landlord on that. You may not be able to have that authority, and if you do it, you may find yourself losing that rental, your security deposit. So these are things that are spelled out in the lease, and if they're not spelled out, you need to ask the question and have them written and signed or initialed by both you and the landlord to ensure that. So let's see if there's anything else that I need to just generally tell you. No. So let's go and dig into the lease. The first thing you need to consider is the duration of the lease. You need to confirm its length, whether it's a 6 month lease, a month lease, a year's lease, and any penalties for breaking it early. This is important because a lot of people find themselves entering into a year's lease only to find out in 6 months something dramatic happens in their family or their living situation or job situation, and they cannot stay that whole year in that property because they need to move somewhere else. Well, what is going to happen? Are you going to still be on the hook for the other 6 months? Is there a notice of 30 days, 60 days that you have to give them? Can you get your security deposit back? Those are things you're going to want to know up front, because once you have to leave, you may still be on the hook for the rest of that lease term. Can you sublet it if you have to leave early? Or will you be able to work out and negotiate something with the landlord? Don't fall into the trap sitting with the landlord or somebody and they say, oh, well, if you have to leave out after 6 months, we'll work it out. We'll work out the details. Don't do that. And the reason I say don't do that is because the person you're talking to now may not be the person you're dealing with then. And if it's not in writing, it cannot be enforced. So no matter what somebody says, none of anything that anyone says means nothing unless it's in the lease. So if they say that you can work it out, if you have to break your lease early, then make sure however you're going to work it out, you agree on it and it's a part of that lease that you sign. Rent. Ensure the amount is clearly stated, along with the due dates, the late fees, and acceptable payment methods. Now, if you're in Georgia, there's new state law that gives you a certain window of time before a landlord would have the ability to go and file for an eviction. So you need to know what that is, wherever you are, wherever you're located. But here's the thing. If the lease says that the money is due on the 1st, then the money is due on the 1st. And it doesn't matter where it falls, it's due on the 1st. Typically, lease agreements give you up until the 5th, but that needs to be spelled out. After the 5th, what was happening, landlords will go on the 6th down to the courthouse and file for your eviction, which would incur you late fees as well as perhaps additional fees for them having to file. You don't want to get into that situation. So you want to pay your rent on time and definitely before any penalties or late fees would kick in. But you need to understand what those are and what could happen and when. Also, how you can pay. You need to know whether or not you have to leave a check, a money order, whether you can direct deposit it electronically, PayPal, Cash App, whatever the method is. You need to understand that and make sure you're following it. Security deposit. Making sure that you understand what the amount is, number one, because that's going to be a part of your budgeting, and what it covers, and what is the conditions for its return. So there's what we call normal wear and tear, okay, and then that needs to be spelled out in the lease. But if you have damaged the property, there's a hole in the wall, your dog scratched up all of the molding around the door because they wanted to get out to use the yard, and you would let them. So now they're going to have to replace them. Those may be something that they may deduct from your security deposit. So you need to understand what it covers and what it doesn't cover. And then you will have to suffer the consequences for those things. Ask a lot of questions. You may want to ask, well, typically how much have you taken out of security deposit and for what things? And it should be spelled out as much as possible in that. Utilities. You want to clarify which utilities are included in the rent and which ones that you're going to be responsible for. And again, going back to step one in our budget, you're going to want to know that because you're going to need to think about, if I have to pay for water, I have to go down, I've got to set up a water account and there's a fee, or an electric account. There may be some fees associated with it, you establishing an account. Those are things that you're going to want to understand because you're going to want to make sure those utilities are on. And I also add a maintenance as well. That's the next step, maintenance and repairs. Who's doing what? Who's responsible for repairs and what repairs? So if the refrigerator goes out, landlord, is that on you or is it on me? If the HVAC goes out, landlord, is that on me or is that on you? Typically, landlords will take care of the major systems. If they provide appliances for you, typically, and I'm saying typically, which If nothing is typical, really. They will, if the refrigerator goes out, fix that. If the stove goes out, fix that. If the microwave goes out, fix that, because those are things that were fixtures in the property. Again, you need to look at your lease and make sure this is spelled out. However, if the light bulb goes out, the landlord is not going to come over there and screw in a light bulb. That may be something that you are responsible for. Keeping the batteries fresh in the smoke detector and carbon monoxide. You need both of those in the property. It may be your responsibility to make sure they're not beeping and that the battery is good, but it would be the landlord's responsibility definitely to make sure that they are there and available and operable. And you would have made sure of that because you would have done a good property inspection, which we talked about in the last video. So if you missed that, check that out. So we're going to talk about restrictions when we come back. We're going to take a quick break. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please hit that thumbs up. We really need you to get this out. I'll be back in about 10 seconds and we'll go on with the next part of the lease.
The real estate market continues to change. Your local Exit Realty office is just a call away. At Exit Realty, we sell homes. Reach out to us today.
So most leases come with what they call a restriction sort of section, things that you can or cannot do, mostly things you cannot do, or you have to do them with certain approval. So let's talk about the number one, that your furry babies, whether they're cats or dogs, they could be guinea pigs, they could be in an aquarium, they could be turtles. You really need to make sure that, usually people think cats and dogs, but some of you have ferrets and pigs and a whole lot of other things. Whether they're spelled out cats and dogs on the only cats and dogs on the lease, or they don't ask you if there are other pets, you need to be upfront with whoever your landlord is about the pets you have, even down to fish or whatever. Make sure they're clear with that. And it might be good to make sure that's noted, because they may ask you for a security deposit for a cat or a dog, but they may not think to ask you for a rabbit or a ferret or a fish. Not that you're trying to rack them up, but you want to let them know, okay, well, I don't have a cat or dog, but I do have a ferret, or I do have a pig, or I do have a fish tank, so that you are clear that they can't come in and ding you a fine because you did not tell them you had pets. And some people, I will say on pets, it may be the size of the pet that they have limits on. It may be the breed of the pet. Some people may not want a certain breed of dog or a cat, for that matter. There's some other breeds, and there may be additional fees. And so you need to know that up front. Modifications. Again, we talked about this earlier. What can you do to make changes on the property, such as painting the walls or installing shelves? I always try to tell people when you're renting, please try to make as many holes as you can, because if you damage or put holes and screw holes, you either are going to have to fix those before the landlord comes and do the final inspection when you're moving out, or they're going to ding your security deposit to make those things right. Occupancy limits. This is really important, not only for the property you're in, but for wherever city you're in. Like, for instance, in the city of Atlanta, no more than 6 unrelated people, and that means related by blood, 6 unrelated people can be in a property. So if you're in this property and you have 6 or 8 different people moving in there, you need to make sure your lease allows that. It may not. It may only be for you and a guest or two. There may be limits to how long your guests can stay there without being a part of the lease. Those are things that you need to know. How many guests can you have? Those are things you need to know in advance. You don't want to get out there and invite your family and then another family in your family that is in hard times, and you invite them in. Now you've got 8 people in the house, even though you might think that the other family just needs to be there temporarily. It could be a violation of your lease, and you need to check that out. And check out the lease and see if it says anything different. So there's some legal clauses as well in your lease that you need to look out for, and that's the termination clause. This is really important because you can always see into the future and what you need and what you don't need. And it is to review the conditions under which the landlord can terminate the lease and what notice must be given. So while you may decide how you need to get out of the lease or you're not going to renew the lease, anything can happen. When you lease a property, that is a difference from owning it, where you know based on certain things, if you pay your mortgage and all those other things, you're good. But if you are leasing a property from someone else, they may terminate the lease from you. Terminate because you violated too many things on the lease, or terminate because, say, the landlord unfortunately passes away and the family, the property is in that estate, doesn't want to continue leasing. They may have to give you notice, and you want to know how long that notice will be so that you have adequate time. Make sure it's in the lease. Adequate time usually is 30 days, but you might want to make sure it's 60 days or more so that you have plenty of time to be able to find your next place to live. And so you need to understand under what conditions they may terminate the lease as well as you. Renewal clause. You need to look for automatic renewal provisions and understand how to renew or end a lease. You don't want to get into a lease that has an automatic renewal unless you are just pretty much certain at that time that you can do that. You can ask for a period of time, 30 days, 60 days, to renegotiate and renew the lease, or make sure that amend the lease so that you have a renewal, automatic renewal, if you just know you're not leaving. But what you don't want to do is to find that out too late. And then find out that you either don't have a place to stay or that the lease may end and you may not have known that it ended. You got to keep up with your renewal date on your own and see also, is it going to increase my rent? Will renewals have automatic increases in it or not? Is that something that you can negotiate on a year by year basis? Those are things you really have to look at each of the lease agreements, understand what the language has, and make sure that language is there and where you can make changes so that it benefits you. Insurance. Some leases require tenants to have renters insurance. Verify and understand if they do require it, what it has to cover, and what it needs to cover. But beyond that, I don't know how to encourage you more than anything else to get renters insurance. Make sure you have something that can cover you. What if the house burns down? All your personal belongings and everything is in there. There could be a loss to you. What if you need a temporary relocation? There's so many things. What if somebody breaks in the property? There are just things that renters insurance, you can get small policies, you can get large policies, but you need to make sure that you protect yourself because there are certain things that the tenant, the property owner is just not going to be responsible for. And so before we get into the last couple of things, I'm going to take another break. But I want to make sure while we're taking that break, it won't take you that long to hit that like button, that thumbs up button, and subscribe. We'll be right back and finish up this. What you need to know for renting right, the must-know tips for smooth rental experience, and we're talking about the lease agreement. See you in just a few seconds. Okay, as we get to wrapping up the lease agreement, I know I've gone through a lot of things, so please review this, make your own list, and of course, always do your research. There's a lot of tools and people out there that can help you. There are many renters guides online that are free that will take you even more detail on what you should look for and things that you should watch out for as you're out there renting. So a couple other things I want to talk about is additional considerations, things that you should consider as well. The move in and move out inspection. So when you're moving into the property, we talked about property condition. That is going to be after you decide, hey, this is a property that I really want to lease. I would suggest, and as I did then, to videotape it and make sure that you're capturing everything. When you're moving in, you probably, when you're doing the inspection that I told you about, and it's detailed, you should videotape it. Because that video is going to be extremely helpful for you when you get ready to move out. If there was a doorknob that wasn't working, if there was a hole in the wall, if there was some crack in the foundation, if there was whatever there was that was a deficiency, if you have it on videotape, when you move out, the landlord cannot come back and say, well, this was not done or that or not done, was not here when you moved in. We're going to take it out of your security deposit because it's going to be noted. Hopefully your landlord will be efficient enough to have a property checklist that you walk through, and you can also, that you walk through, and that you can also make sure that you checking off and signing off on that, so that you know exactly the condition, not only in video or pictures, and both. If you find a deficiency, I would use the video, but I'd also take a picture, and also make sure if they have you sign a move-in condition report, that you make sure it's noted and signed in. And when you move out, you can avoid a lot of disputes that way. Here's another one that people don't think about to look for: landlord access. As a landlord, when I had a property, I had the HVAC people come twice a year. I had the people to do and spray for the termites and look for any other pest control once a year. That was me. Not all landlords do that. But what you need to know too is that not only do you have a key to your property, and that's probably in the lease as well, you can't change the locks without permission from the landlord. They can have access to your property. You need to make sure you understand what your landlord's access will be, understand the terms and conditions under which they will enter the property, and notification that is required for them to enter your property, because you are leasing that space. It is your private space, and you should make sure you understand with your landlord how and when you will be noticed if they have to enter the property. Some leases also have for the property owner to be able to come and inspect maybe once a year or whatever. That could happen, because sometimes they want to make sure ongoing the conditions are well, or at the end of a lease period. So those are the things that you need to know. I know it's a lot, but you've got to read that lease agreement. Read it, and then understand it and ask many questions. Your lease agreement can be a problem later on. And typically I've talked to people who've had problems with landlords, and I say, what does your lease say? Oh, I don't know. Well, pull out the lease. Oh, I've got to find it. Make sure it is put up with your important documents that you can easily access, because not only you are required to follow the lease, your landlord is as well. I hope this is helpful. We are going to continue to move down this list of things to make your rental experience a smooth one. We've just finished up with lease agreements. The next time we're going to talk about landlord and property management, and perhaps some of your rights as a tenant. So we'll look forward to seeing you in tip 4. We're on tip 4 for tip 5 and beyond. Thank you so much. Please reach out to me if need be at Ask Felicia at exitrealtywestmidtown.com, or you can text Ask Felicia to 85377. All right, we're going to end it here, and I'll see you for the next tip. like, share, subscribe. Take care.